Good morning, everybody. It's still a couple of hours left in the morning. I was going to go ahead and talk to you a little bit about your brain and metabolism and how poor metabolism can actually affect your brain, your thinking, and over the long term, actually start to destroy your brain. And so I'm using a new system here that I'm going to hang on just a minute. I need to get organized. I hit go live before I was really ready to go live. But hang on a second, screen share, and just give me 2 more seconds. Bam. And there I am. Okay. So let's switch this here. So your brain is extremely sensitive to the state of your metabolism. And if you're doing things on the regular that negatively affect that, well, it becomes very obvious in a short amount of time. The central factor in this is insulin resistance. If you become insulin resistant, then your brain starts to starve for energy. It's ironic because you're actually taking in a lot of energy, but your brain's starving for energy. And I'm going to explain all that. And then I'm going to explain what you can do about it to optimize your brain function, your brain thinking, the longevity of your cognition. This is important because you live your life in your brain. Your brain is how you sense everything. It's how you interpret the world. And if it starts to go, well, then you start to go. That's you. That's your reality. So let me click this. This is a new AI presentation that I've made. I made this entire presentation with AI, believe it or not, even though I'm a boomer. So here's the process. This is the basic process of metabolism. It is first taking in the food, then digesting it, and then releasing the energy that's in that food, and then converting it to a form of fuel that your brain can actually use. So you can't just use the energy that's in the food as it is. That would be like pulling oil out of the ground and then just pumping it straight into your car. Your car doesn't burn what's under the ground right now. First, it's got to go to a refinery, and I'm going to explain how that works in your brain. You've got a similar process. But here's the problem, is that if you are continuously eating highly processed foods, ultra processed foods, or a lot of sugar, a lot of refined carbs, this is what starts to happen to your blood insulin. It starts to go up. Your insulin levels stay up all the time, even when you're not eating. So you have a normal zone, here, and you would prefer to see the insulin levels, for sure below 8, better below 6. So this zone right here is where you'd want to be. But if you go and check a fasting insulin level, and it is over 10, you are headed for type 2 diabetes. And when the insulin levels are high all the time, it's going to mess up your ability to properly convert energy into fuel, energy from food into fuel for your brain and for the rest of your body for that matter. It'll also start generating a lot of inflammation in your body, including inside your brain. So let's get to the nitty gritty on this. There is a part of your brain. It is called the mitochondria. The mitochondria is that fuel refinery station. You might have learned about the mitochondria back in 6th, 7th grade. They call it the powerhouse of the cell. And again, this is where the energy from food is converted into a form called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. That's the part that your brain can actually use for energy. But again, if you keep pumping in too much fuel, imagine an oil refinery that you keep overloading with too much oil, so much oil that eventually the machinery inside that refinery starts getting gummed up. It starts throwing off sparks. It starts causing problems. And eventually you're not making fuel that your car can burn. You've just got a gummed up refinery that's not performing anymore. And that is literally what is happening with the mitochondria in your brain once you start eating in this way. So there's a few key things that additionally start happening that are bad for your brain. There's a barrier all around your brain, your spinal cord. It's a privileged space, the central nervous system, not the things that the rest of your body get exposed to, the brain doesn't get exposed to because it's a very sensitive organ and it can't, tolerate much of that. So it's got this very important barrier. But if you are eating in this way, that makes you insulin resistant. You have these high insulin levels, the inflammation starts going up. Well, the blood-brain barrier starts to break down. The brain starts getting exposed to things that it's not supposed to be. This starts to compromise the function, starts to create inflammation. You start losing brain cells at an accelerated rate over time. You got a leaky brain at that point. You've heard of leaky gut. Well, you also get a leaky brain at that point. And then there's another thing. This is probably one of the most important losses of function that you could get, called Hebbian learning, because your ability to adapt and learn is probably your greatest skill for survival as a human. And if that skill, that ability gets compromised, life gets hard very quickly. If you're over the age of 40, you do not want your Hebbian learning ability to get compromised. So what is Hebbian learning? The saying is that neurons that fire together wire together. So just imagine two friends on a playground, okay? And the more that they interact with each other, the more of a bond they get, the more collaborative they become, the more they can get done together. And it's the same thing with the neurons in your brain. If you're trying to learn something new, you've got all these neurons firing in the beginning, trying to figure it out. But then as you do it over and over again, let's say, take the example of swinging a tennis racket. When you go to swing a tennis racket, and you're trying to get it right, hit the ball right, make the ball go in the exact spot in the other side of the court. Well, your brain's going through this process over and over again, and all these neurons are firing. But when you start to get it right, then certain neurons will start to wire together. They start to make a signal stronger than all of these extraneous signals, because that was the right path. Eventually, you start shaving off all the extraneous, useless neurons firing, and you get just the path that really works, and they are firing together because they're literally getting wired together. This is what we call Hebbian learning. That whole process, this is what speeds your ability to learn things. This is why humans have thrived on this planet, is because of this aspect of our brains, how well we do Hebbian learning. And that starts to get compromised whenever you are insulin resistant. They can't wire together. They can't start collaborating. The whole process is slowed down. Imagine your boss comes in, you got a new boss on the scene, and that boss wants to change 4 different systems that you guys have been doing for years. He wants to do something totally different, four different things. It's going to be a big drag, right? Well, it's going to be very impossible or very difficult for you to adapt to these new systems. If you're insulin resistant, your Hebbian learning is compromised. It's going to take you forever. It's going to be extremely frustrating. There are other circumstances where, these, symptoms of compromised brain function pop up. For example, you have your watch in your hand. You mean to put it on, but you go into the kitchen, you've realized you forgot something in the bedroom. So you lay the watch on the counter in the kitchen. You go back into the bedroom. Somebody calls you while you're in the bedroom. You get on the phone with them. You come back into the kitchen. You cannot remember where you put that watch. It's just the memory of it isn't clear in your mind. You end up spending 15, 20 minutes looking for that watch. And then you finally realize it's right next to the jar, on the counter where you put it. Or you have difficulty calculating the tip after a dinner somewhere at a restaurant. It's just, you're having to plug the numbers into your phone to calculate a 20% tip because you just can't get it in your head or whatever. These are the little things that become a lot more difficult. These should be simple, easy, quick tasks for you, but they start to get more difficult the more compromised your brain function gets. Then there's your cleaning crew, the brain cleaning crew. Now, your body has a system called the lymphatic system. It helps to get rid of waste and keep things flowing properly. And if it doesn't work well, then things start getting backed up. You start having problems. Well, your brain has its own special system. Like I said, it's a privileged space, so it doesn't participate with the rest of the body. It has its own system, and it's called the glymphatic system. And it primarily functions at night while you're sleeping. But if you're not sleeping well and sleep gets very disrupted if you're insulin resistant, then you compromise that glymphatic cleanup system. Then you've got the internet cables of your brain, the white matter. These are the cables that connect one part to the other. They connect other parts of the brain to other parts of the brain. They connect the brain to the body parts. And think of a wire in your house, anything that's plugged into an electrical socket, it's got a plastic sheath on the outside of it. Now, in your brain, you have a similar thing. It's called myelin. And if that myelin starts getting damaged, well, then electrical currents don't flow through that neuron so well. You don't conduct the electricity so well. Your brain is, electric powered. It flows on electric currents. So it will be compromised if that myelin sheath gets damaged. And that's exactly what starts to happen when you're insulin resistant. The brain is inflamed. You start having slowing, janky connections between brain parts and between the brain and body parts. Then there's the microglia. Think of it as like a gardener to a garden. The gardener does a bunch of different functions. He makes sure things are irrigated. He carries nutrients to the plants. He makes sure that the pathways through the garden are clean and orderly, and just, generally he gets the waste out. He tends to it. He defends it against invaders, making sure, there's no insects able to get in there, or, other animals eating the plants. And that's what the microglia are to your brain. They are sort of guardians and repair and custodians of your brain. And if they stop working well, your brain starts breaking down. You start losing brain cells a lot faster. And you want those microglia functioning at top level your whole life. But this starts to get compromised when you become insulin resistant. So how the mitochondria shut down, sort of the pathway is you're eating too much sugar, your insulin levels start going up because it's a compensation. This is homeostasis. If your cells become more resistant to insulin, then you have to raise the insulin levels up to sort of keep, overpowering that resistance. But high insulin levels start to cause an overload on your brain cells and all of the supporting cells of your brain. You start to get malfunction of that. The mitochondria stop functioning and stop being able to make that ATP. That's the actual molecule that your brain can use for energy, and you slow down the brain function. Now, it's not broken forever. It's just clogged up. But it can go, there is a point of no return. There is a part where if you keep going, you're way more likely to develop Alzheimer's or vascular dementia, the most two common types. It takes years, and even if you start to develop a little dementia compromise, in some cases you can recover some of that function. But by and large, you should consider what is lost is lost. If you start entering into the dementia zone, for most, you should consider what's lost is lost. Okay. Don't bank on recovering function, but it does happen to a limited extent for some people. So what's the fix? How do you fix this compromise in brain function? Part one is fasting, an intermittent fasting regimen. There's nothing that will put your metabolism in a 180 back toward the good side faster than doing intermittent fasting. You go a period of time where you're just not eating. And when you don't eat, you don't need high insulin. The insulin levels begin to drop and your cells become resensitized to the insulin again. And then you just spend a smaller window of time where you're actually eating. Now, how long does the fast need to be? In the beginning, it could only be 12 hours. There's some benefit to just not eating for 12 hours. That would mean at 8 o'clock at night, you stop eating. You don't have another thing until 8 o'clock the next morning. Better if you can make it 14 or 16 hours. And so for me personally, I do a 14-hour fast every night. So I don't eat anything after 10 p.m. and I then break fast the next day at 12 p.m. And I'll have 2 meals and usually like a protein shake, before within an hour before going to bed. So when you do this, that is probably the first best move that you can do to really start to reverse the bad metabolism, get your insulin levels back, get your cells sensitive to insulin. The second part is real food. Okay. The more you need to, if you don't know what ultra processed food is, you need to read on it. I'm not going to teach you that here. You need to Google what is ultra processed food, what defines a processed food. There's different levels of processing, and the less processed, the better. And but just briefly to just give you an idea, let's look at rice. Okay, when you eat white rice, that is a processed food because in nature, rice has, an outer coating. It's the fiber. Well, they cook that off of there. They got to get that off. That's what makes it white because there's actually what would give rice a different color would be that outer coating, but they get that off of there. They get the germ out of it. Anything that, has the nutrients, that's got to go too. So then it's just pure white rice. It's basically cake. Okay. It's a carbohydrate that's almost similar to what's in flour. And you got to think of that fiber that normally comes with the rice in nature. If you eat that together, it makes it like a time release capsule. It slows down how fast the carbohydrate in that rice hits your bloodstream. And when it does that, it keeps your insulin levels low. You're supposed to eat the carbohydrate with the fiber. But when you separate those two, it's like you're freebasing the carbohydrate. So insulin levels get jacked and it makes you hungry again within 90 minutes. So you don't want to do that. You want to keep the fiber with whatever carbohydrate you eat. Focus on proteins and healthy fats. And if you're eating a lower carbohydrate diet, though, and if you want to shock the system back into the good side, then what you would want to do is carbohydrate restrict, at least for a while. 2 weeks of a orthodox ketogenic diet, and then liberalize it gradually over a couple months after that. And then after that point, you're eating 100 to 150 grams of carbs per day, depending on your size, and making sure that all those carbs are complex carbs. Sugar, if you want that after that point, it's on Saturday. Saturday is fatter day. One meal, a dessert, have some rules about it. My rule is I don't eat sugar unless it's coming in the form of something special. It's not going to be a roll of 5 donuts out of the vending machine. It's going to be something from a restaurant or something that we cook special. Going to have to do a little work for it at least. And that's it. And then that's the sugar that I'm going to take in for the week. Have a high standard about sugar. If you're eating sugar every single day, that's a low standard. And that's a good way to start sending yourself off into a bad situation. So focus on the protein. And when you eat, the order of the foods that you take in, especially if you're metabolically not healthy right now, it matters. So, take in your protein and your fats first. And then if you're going to eat some carbohydrate in the form of beans, sweet potato, or whatever it is, quinoa, wild rice, black or red rice is better, then you eat those last. And that will help to keep that blood sugar level lower and your insulin levels lower. And if you're incorporating some fiber into that, then you avoid slam dunking your blood sugar down within 90 minutes, which makes you hungry all over again. That's why you get hungry, is because you have a surge in insulin that then slam dunks your blood sugar. And then before you know it, you're hungry all over again. But if you incorporate the fiber in there, well, your blood sugar hangs out a little bit longer, keeping you feeling satisfied a lot longer. So you end up eating less food over time. I want to go in a little bit about this in the gut. The gut is sensitive to what you eat too. It's a big part of the metabolism stream. So this right here is the anatomy of the gut wall. On this side of these cells is the lumen of your gut. It's, the side the food is on when you eat it. On this side is the inside of your body. There's a row of cells, enterocytes. They are kind of the soldiers that hold the line between what's in your guts, keeping the bad stuff that's in your guts from getting into your body. There needs to be a process, okay? Sort of like coming into another country. You have to go through the proper channels. But if you are eating a lot of sugar, okay, and a lot of refined carbohydrates, then these bacteria that live in your gut, the wrong ones will become more plentiful. So there's a few of them listed here. E. gallinarum, Klebsiella pneumonia, and all these species here become a lot more plentiful. And what they do is they eat the mucosa of your gut down. That is a protective mucosa. And when it goes, these enterocytes start to suffer. They start to get damaged, and bad things can start to get in. That's the leaky gut. Now, here's the thing about that. Just on the inside of this row of cells is about 80% of your immune system in your entire body is just on the inside of these cells. If these invaders start getting in there, a big fight starts, you start a lot of inflammatory processes going off. And they begin circulating through your body a lot of inflammatory molecules, cytokines that start to generate a lot of damage to every part of your body, including your brain. So you want to feed these bacteria fiber because that keeps the good guys more plentiful. It keeps this mucosa intact and protected, and keeps you from getting the leaky gut. So now part 3 of this. So we already talked about, eating real food, doing the fasting. Part 3 is getting a little bit of movement in. Simply walking for 15 minutes within 15 minutes of each meal is huge benefit. It reduces your risk for nearly all chronic disease as much as 50%. I mean, that is probably as protective as taking, all the medicines that your doctor wants you to take. Just simply taking a 15-minute walk within 15 minutes of a meal. You don't have to walk, you don't have to go out and run like you're training for the Olympics every day. That one move would make a huge difference. But the more intensely you exercise, the better, as long as you're not wearing your joints out. And if you're someone who's been considering, you want to get into the exercise thing, you want to make this part of your life, one of the things I would recommend, especially if you're over the age of 40, is at least for a month or two, is hiring a trainer, somebody with a National Academy of Sports Medicine certification, NASM. Okay, now there may be great trainers in your town, but when somebody tells you somebody's a great trainer, all that lets you know is they like that person. But if they have an NASM certification, they know what they're doing, and they will be able to set up workout routines for you that will keep you from getting hurt. Okay. So even if nobody likes them, even if they're not nice, but if they've got that NASM training, then they're not going to hurt you. And that's important after you get at age 40. If you want to be able to do this for the long run, then you want to be able to do it right. So there's a thing about exercise that when you do exercise, moderate or high intensity exercise, there is a certain molecule that your body produces. It's the equivalent to the fountain of youth. If we could bottle it up and make it, it would be worth a lot, but it's called interleukin 10. Interleukin 10 is like the fountain of youth. It's like water from the fountain of youth that keeps your body youthful and preserves you. And it only surges whenever you do moderate or high intensity exercise. The more intensity exercise, the more interleukin 10 comes out. But what this also does, in addition to keeping the body young and fresh, is that your muscles are what help you to become metabolically flexible. They are the sugar sink is what we call them. And the more muscle and you begin to lose muscle if you don't use it after a certain age, And the faster you lose that muscle, the more metabolically inflexible that you are becoming. And the harder it is to remain insulin sensitive, which means then the brain starts to get compromised. If you want your brain to stay functioning well throughout your life, you need to do a bit of resistance training, lifting the weights. And ladies, don't worry that you're going to turn into the Incredible Hulk. People overestimate how hard it is. I've been doing resistance training for 7 years, and I'm not anywhere near hulky. It's just harder than you think to build that kind of muscle. So don't worry about it. You're not going to, look masculine because you're lifting weights, but you will definitely keep a sharp brain, and you will definitely feel and look better if you do this. And then also, of course, throwing in some cardio training as well in with that. But the resistance training is a very important part of this. So when you exercise, there's this benefit that comes along with it, is that you get a boost of something called brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Think of this as a miracle grow for your brain. It will keep the brain cells intact. It helps them to make new connections. We talked about Hebbian learning earlier, neurons that fire together, wire together. It preserves that whole process of you being able to learn quickly, keeping you mentally, cognitively flexible and adaptable. And just, you wouldn't believe the statistics on people who are over the age of 70, especially if they're insulin resistant. About 3/4 of them have difficulty carrying on a conversation that involves 2 or more people. So if you're sitting in a 3-way conversation with some people and you're over the age of 75 and you're insulin resistant, it's hard for you to keep up with what's going on in that conversation. You're pretty much limited to one-on-ones, or you're losing track of what's going on, and you don't want to be there. You want to be able to you want to be the grandpa that everybody knows they can't get any, or the grandma that people know they can't slick things by them because they're very alert. They know what's going on. They know what's up. All right. By the way, if you're wondering what I'm sipping on here, I'm going to get into that here at the end. But let's suffice to say, when you exercise, when you remain insulin sensitive, you will keep your brain-derived neurotrophic factor plentiful and your brain functioning well. It's miracle grow for the brain. The fifth part of this is getting sleep and sunlight exposure daily. Okay. If you screw up your circadian rhythms by sleep procrastination or looking at a lot of digital screens late into the night, or worse yet, sleeping with digital screens shining on your eyes, what it does is it just simply closing your eyes puts you into alpha waves. But if you close your eyes, or if you just stare at a digital screen, it also puts you in alpha waves. So, and if you're trying to sleep and get into those deeper phases of sleep, but you've got light shining through your eyelids, and that's registering back to your brain, it's disrupting your ability to get into REM sleep. So when that happens, the circadian rhythm for cortisol gets screwed up. Cortisol is a stress hormone. It usually peaks at the top of the morning. It prepares you for the day, but you don't want high cortisol late in the afternoon, because that's going to make you hungry. It's going to make you crave sugary, sweet, high-fat foods. And high cortisol makes you more insulin resistant directly. It's a direct effect of cortisol that makes you more insulin resistant. So you definitely want to get your circadian rhythms right. And then each day, 15 minutes of exposure to direct sunlight helps to, orchestrate all of your body's hormonal circadian rhythms. So it's very important to get a little sunlight. So if you're at work, take a 15-minute walk outside every day. Get that 15 minutes of direct sun exposure, and then get very regular, read up about sleep hygiene and become a master of sleep hygiene. So to recap this, your brain's power plants, the mitochondria, they need steady fuel and they need breaks from exposure to that fuel. Okay. And so the mitochondria will start to malfunction if you keep bombarding the brain with with high levels of insulin and sugar. And when this happens, then the clubhouse fence, that blood-brain barrier, begins to break down. If you don't, if you become insulin resistant, that allows toxins into the brain. It generates inflammation. The cleanup crew, the glymphatic system, stops working so well, especially if you're not getting sleep at night, because that's when it's primarily working. And then you got to protect the internet cables in your brain, the white matter that connects your brain to its other parts, or the brain to your body parts. If you become insulin resistant, then those internet cables start to break down. And then you got to keep the microglia. That's the cleanup. That's the gardeners that tend to the garden of your brain. They help keep the bad guys out, the insects out. They keep the pathways clean, and they get the damaged parts out of there, make sure that everything's fresh and clean. And that, if that stops going, then your brain starts to become a mess really fast, and you start to begin noticing breakdown of your ability to just think. And then your world starts to become very tough. Eventually, if you just string this out forever, then you will start to end up with, issues of dementia. And those typically are permanent changes. You don't want that happening to you. So now I'm just going to transition to this a little bit just for a second. If you have a hard time, I told you that fasting is a great thing to do, and that staying away from sugar is a real good move. Abstaining from refined carbohydrates and doing maybe even a ketogenic diet for a couple of weeks to put yourself in a 180 toward the right direction. But if this is a tall order for you, which it was for me, until I was exposed to and introduced to a natural system that allowed me to do both. I couldn't fast. I couldn't not eat sugar at all. I couldn't comply with that. But then a dietitian came along. Her name is Shannon Davis. She happens to be, at this point, on the board of the American Diabetes Society. So along with Robert Lustig and some other, well-respected people on an international level in the metabolic health space. And the system is called the Feel Great system. It is actually both of the two components in this are both listed in something called the PDR, the Physician's Desk Reference, which is the Bible of pharmaceuticals that doctors use to look up for drugs and nutraceuticals. You don't get in there unless you've got very credible sources for the research behind this product. This is now being looked at by a lot of major institutions, some of them Ivy League medical institutions now, and it's gaining traction worldwide. It's in 55 countries, at least, that I know. In fact, someone today from Hungary just subscribed to this through me. But here's what it is. It's very simple to use. This isn't like a difficult thing. So first of all, you've got a bottle. They give you this bottle. It's got 2 lines on it. The first line is for the Unamate. This is Unamate. It is an extract from a tea called yerba mate that comes from South America. Inside of this packet is a lot of something called chlorogenic acid, which has a direct effect on your cells to make them sensitive to insulin again. It helps to lower your insulin levels. Now, if weight loss or weight control was an issue for you, well, if you have high insulin levels, you cannot burn fat, because high insulin levels shut off the enzyme. It's called a hormone-sensitive lipase. That's the enzyme that helps chop up your fat so you can use it for fuel. But you can't burn fat if that enzyme doesn't work. And so if you have insulin resistance, high insulin levels, it's going to be extremely difficult to burn fat. But if you drink this, then it resensitizes your cells to the insulin. The insulin levels begin to drop, and then that enzyme can go to work, helping you burn fat. It does another thing that's very important. This was discovered at the University of Utah in some recent research, which is this helps you to raise your GLP-1 up when you are fasting. This is why it makes it a lot easier to fast, because you're just not as hungry. So rather than injecting yourself with like Ozempic or Wegovy, these things that suppress your appetite 2,500 times longer than your own GLP-1 is supposed to do. Again, these were modeled after a lizard peptide. a lizard that doesn't eat but a couple of times a year. But you're not a lizard that eats a couple of times a year. You're supposed to eat, at least a little bit every week, and, ideally. And so again, this comes back to that homeostasis concept. If you massively suppress one system in your body, there's going to be a pushback. You're getting married to the drug. If you suppress the hunger response, which is mediated by something called ghrelin. Ghrelin is the peptide that makes you hungry when you get that little rumble in your tummy. Well, GLP-1 shuts that off. But if you're shutting that down 2,500 times longer than you're normally supposed to, well, what do you think happens if you suddenly stop taking that drug? Well, it's revved up. It's going to try to, and that's what happens every single time as you see these people regain the weight, and often more weight than they ever lost. And then they've lost muscle on top. And I told you, muscle is the sugar sink. It's what makes you metabolically flexible. They're losing muscle. 40% of the weight that they lose is in the form of muscle and bone. So it's even more difficult to get it back off the second time. Instead, just simply raise your own body's manufacture of GLP-1 strategically just when you need it. So let's say you stop eating at 8 o'clock, you wake up in the morning, say you feel that little rumble in your tummy, you want something to eat, you just sip on this. That's it. And this will help shut your hunger down for a normal amount of time, not 2,500 times longer, until you can get to lunch. And then you have your lunch. Now that's where step 2 of this system comes in. Step 2 is balance. Balance, same bottle, fill it to the second line, a little bit lower, dump it in, shake it up, and down it right before you have your lunch. What this is, it's a collection, it's a patented collection of about 14 different plant sources of high-grade soluble fiber. This ain't no Benefiber. Okay, this ain't no Metamucil. I ate a mess of that stuff. It never did anything for me. But this, within 2 days, I knew I forgot to eat lunch. And my gut health dramatically improved. What you notice when you start using these two every day, suppressing, skipping breakfast in the morning, doing the intermittent fasting, and using this to stay not hungry until lunch, putting this before your lunch or your dinner, doesn't matter which. And I actually put one before lunch and dinner. I get an extra box of these and have one before lunch and dinner. You're drinking 2 of these a day, 1 of these a day. I'm doing 2 and 2 personally. You just start noticing you're not as hungry. The brain fog goes away. Suddenly you can realize like you can think again. You start seeing the weight come down because you can make better choices at the dinner table. You're not just white knuckling it. And it's like, for me, by the time it was lunchtime at work, even though I'd already had breakfast, I was going straight for the most decadent of foods that they had in this doctor's lounge. And for sure, I was going to get a couple of those chocolate chip cookies. Now I could walk right past that stuff. I've got control. And, I eat the good choices of meat and the vegetables and some, complex carbs in a normal amount. And then I go back to work. That's it. I'm not going crazy. I don't feel the need to snack in between all that again. I'm not constantly thinking about hunger anymore. It just kills that food hunger. And then I started checking my labs after. I showed you this slide a minute ago. Let me show you here about what happens to your fasting insulin levels. So I had a high fasting insulin level before. And now my fasting insulin was so low, it wasn't detectable. The machine couldn't detect the level. So I'm extremely sensitive to insulin. So it's easier for me to think. It's easier for me to keep fat off. It controls my hunger. It's an optimal metabolism. There's a test your doctor almost certainly never checks. When you go for a well visit, they're going to check a hemoglobin A1C. They're going to check a fasting glucose. And if those are abnormal, they're going to tell you, hey, you're in trouble. You got type 2 diabetes or you've got pre-diabetes. You need to get to work on this. And by the way, here's your pill. Okay. But the problem with that is those 2 tests, fasting glucose, hemoglobin A1C. Once they're abnormal, that just tells you the house is already on fire. Wouldn't you like to know that the stove was left on before the house catches on fire? That's what a HOMA-IR, HOMA-IR, that IR stands for insulin resistance, or a fasting insulin level, not fasting glucose, but a fasting insulin level. You ask your doctor for that test, a fasting insulin and a HOMA-IR, and then you can find out, is the stove on? Because then you can turn the stove on and avoid the house ever even getting on fire. Because once it's on fire, you're taking damage every minute. So if you want the HOMA-IR and fasting insulin to go down, this every day. And here's the great part. Through my link, I'm going to put a link here. I'm really getting tech savvy here. Look at that. But I'm going to show you something really cool. I just learned this. Again, I'm a boomer. If you already knew this, well, I didn't know this till recently. You can screenshot this screen right now. Screenshot it if you know how to do that. And then hold your thumb down over that QR code that you see down here at the bottom of the screen. Just hold your thumb on the picture of the screenshot, and it will take you to this website. But through my link, you're going to get a 32% discount. Okay, it's normally like $235 a month. You're getting a 90-day money-back guarantee on this system. Okay, so you can trial for 3 months. And if you don't like it, you can get your money back. That was what sold me on it. I thought, okay, if you're going to let me try it for a quarter of the year and I can still get my money back, that's long enough. I mean, if it hadn't done something for me by then fine. You know, I should know by then. So try it for the 90 days. Don't be skeptical, or you're going to screw yourself out of a good thing here. I mean, it's just the bottom line. Don't be skeptical. If you know that you're carrying a little extra weight, that you got a cholesterol issue, you got high blood pressure, maybe you're pre-diabetic or type 2 diabetic already, and you're sick of, you know, how things are going, don't be skeptical. Try this, and you've got nothing to lose and everything to potentially gain. So I hope you found this helpful. I'm going to keep doing this. I've decided to promote this. My father died from metabolic syndrome, that constellation of insulin resistance, overweight, high blood pressure, cholesterol, all that. And that's why this means so much to me. And this is something that I think, you know, right now, this is a movement. This isn't just some new gag thing or whatever that's going to come and go. This is taking over. This is going to become first line therapy for anyone with metabolic syndrome. And story after story of people that I've, you know, met over and over again. And just, you know, here's a comment from today, 2 of them just from today, right here. Let's see. Where is it? Library. Here we go. Here's one. A person said, I've been on the protocol consistently since May 2025. I'm a lifer. And then a second one said, I started the protocol to lose weight. Not only did I lose weight, I got my life back, Crohn's disease in remission, no flares in over a year, off 14 medicines, depression and anxiety gone, migraines gone, joint pain gone. That was another thing that improved for me on this. I had a tendonitis in my right ankle. It was like this burning pain on the outside of my right ankle for 2 years straight. And I just wouldn't go away. And I was exercising actually during this time. I didn't have my eating right. So I was still kind of gaining weight. And I had this tendonitis in my ankle. And I got on the system. And after about 2 weeks, it just started fading away. It just gone, never to return. I had it every day for 2 years. And then it just faded away because the inflammation levels start to go down. You got a lot of aches and pains. You know, when I see patients in the clinic for spine, neck, and back problems, the ones that I end up operating on, the vast majority of them are insulin resistant. And a hefty chunk of them are outright type 2 diabetics that actually end up getting an operation for an elective spine problem, elective spine surgery for a degenerative spine problem. probably 80–90% of them are insulin resistant. I'd say at least a third of them are type 2 diabetics outright. So if you get on this system, there's one particular spine disease. It's called DISH, diffuse idiopathic skeletal hyperostosis. They form these huge bone spurs on the spine. And it is directly related to insulin resistance. I mean, almost 100% of them that have this disease have insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes. High insulin levels chews up your body, every single part of it. It's the number one risk factor on a population basis for having a heart attack, a stroke. You get the insulin levels down, a lot of things start going right for you. You start reducing your risk. And if you're doing it by cleaning up how you eat, which becomes a lot easier once you get on this system, and if you do it by adding a little movement in your daily routine, especially if you're getting moderate to high intensity exercise 4 or 5 days a week, the risk benefit on that there is you get more risk reduction doing that than you could taking whatever medicines that your doctor is telling you to take, unless you've already had a heart attack or a stroke before, okay? Or you've got some weird genetic abnormality like familial hypercholesterolemia. Now, if you got those things, you've had that situation, you probably need to be on meds. But if you haven't, you're 40 something, you're 50 something, you're 60 something, you never had a heart attack, never had a stroke, you don't have a familial abnormality, then get in a little exercise 4 or 5 days a week, throw this in front of your food, start cleaning up, leveraging this to help you avoid sugar and just only eating complex carbohydrates, focusing on meat, healthy fats. That's more risk reduction, at least twice as much risk reduction than taking whatever pills that they could offer you. There's one guy that I met, he weighed 492 pounds, almost a quarter of a ton. He was on 24 medicines, 24. I would love to have been a fly on the wall in the room when he was talking with the doctor, and the doctor's saying, I know you're already on 23 medicines, but we got to add one more. This is going to save you this time, I promise you. So he gets on this protocol right here, and then which helps him to adapt his diet. And then he starts getting in just some basic regular movement, some walking 4 or 5 days a week. And 9 months later, he stripped off 115 pounds. He's now on 3 medicines, soon to be none. That was 6 months ago. He may not be on any medicines at this point. I don't know. I just saw him recently, and he looks better each time. And imagine this now. He went from 492, stripped off about 100 pounds. So he's at 380. Okay, so he's still morbidly obese, and yet he went from needing 24 medicines to 3, still morbidly obese. So that means if you start doing things right, the metabolism is already saving you. You don't need the medications even before your weight is fully normal again. Okay, you're either doing right. You can take the meds, which kind of mitigate the risk a little bit, or you can do this, which works with your metabolism to put you in the best state possible so that you can then begin to eat properly and then get in a little movement. There is no comparison to that for risk reduction that I'm aware of. I hope you take advantage of this. Again, if you want to try this system risk-free, you can do it for 90 days risk-free. They'll give you the money back if you're not satisfied. They got some new flavors. They even have a decaffeinated version of the Unimate. So if you have nighttime hunger, which was a problem for me for a while, you just take the decaf version at night, suppress the appetite at night. 1 in the morning at the top of your day when you're trying to make it to lunch, and then 1 at night if you have nighttime hunger. And then put the balance in front of your largest meal for the day. I personally drink 2 of these a day, 1 before each meal. And you live in a harsh, some people will ask me, do I need to take this forever? And you live in a harsh food environment here in the US. It's not always, I don't, have time to meal prep all the time. Sometimes I'm out of town working a job at an emergency room. I don't have time to meal prep. I've got to eat whatever restaurants around. I try to pick the best sensible food that I can get from those restaurants. And then I just throw this in front of it. It's a shield, a metabolic shield that helps keep the gut health good, keeps the inflammation down, keeps the insulin levels down. So I'm not overeating like crazy. It's especially important then because they got me up late at night. So I'm not getting great sleep. That tends to derail your hunger signals and makes you hungrier. And you want just everything that's bad. But if I'm sipping on this, I'm still in control. It's a natural GLP-1 stimulant. Your own body's GLP-1, not some weird artificial molecule made in a lab with a patent on it that we don't know the long-term effects of. That's the other thing about the GLP-1s. We don't know the long-term with that. So by the way, if you've already tried GLP-1s, or even if you're on one, you can still take this and take them at the same time. Get on this, transition off to GLP-1 with your doctor's advice, basically. In my opinion, I'm going to qualify this very strongly. In my opinion, GLP-1 medications should only be used for people who have type 2 diabetes, period. In my opinion, they are not for the person that's just simply looking to lose some weight. The risks, the complications with those medicines, blindness. I just met a woman recently who had a double foot drop, both feet, foot drop. Pancreatitis, which is a potentially lethal condition, up to 50% mortality rate with pancreatitis if you get it. Again, it's not common to get it, but if you get it, then it sucks. Okay, it's a bad deal. But with this, why wouldn't you do this first? You're not going to get pancreatitis with this. You're not going to get thyroid cancer. You're not going to go blind. You're not going to get a double foot drop. You're not going to get Ozempic face or Ozempic burps or lose your hair or your teeth, your bone or your muscle. You're going to hang on to all that stuff. Okay. Marketing is a strong thing. And those companies have huge marketing budgets. They've got you thinking that is the best thing that has ever happened to humanity. So if that's the case, why are they now trying to figure out a drug for you to take simultaneously with it so you don't lose muscle and bone? Did you know that? They don't want you to know that, but that's what they're after. They're trying to come up with another thing they can make money on to add to this other thing that already sucks so that you don't lose the muscle and bone that you lose with Ozempic, tirzepatide, Wegovy, Zepbound, whatever it is. All right, that's enough preaching. Try this Feel Great system first. Do it the healthy way. And by the way, we'll be in touch. If you subscribe through my link, I'm going to see your name. I'm going to reach out to you. You'll have me, and I'm connected to some nationally known dietitians and other professionals, healthcare professionals to this. We're going to tailor this experience. If you got any issues or questions, we're going to answer those for you. We truly want you to get what you're looking to get out of this system. We don't want you to fail. We want you to have the same great experience that we've had on it. And I can tell you this, after having referred this to hundreds of people at this point, the ones that took the system and took it every day like you're supposed to. Not everybody's compliant, obviously. But the ones that took it on the daily, they all had the same experience. If they needed to lose weight, they lost weight. If they needed to improve cholesterol numbers, that happened as well. And all of the rest of those health metrics got better. And that's the beauty of it. You can measure all of these things. You can measure a fasting glucose, a fasting insulin, hemoglobin A1C, your cholesterol levels, your waist circumference, your weight. These are all measurable things. All right. Again, last time before I go, screenshot the screen right here if you're on your phone. Hold your thumb down over this QR code on the screenshot. It will take you to the website. And then subscribe. Try it for 3 months, risk-free. That's it.